So I just was talking at the camera for quite some time and then realized I was filming in slow-mo. I'm Mick. Welcome to my August reading wrap up. So for me, August was the end of summer. I am, for the most part, fully in fall mode. I did go to a pool today. If I look like I have hat hair a little bit, that would be why. Okay, that would be why. But for the most part, I've fully transitioned into the fall vibe. So in my mind, August was kind of like my summer send-off month. So I have a lot of summer reads, and then I also just was really in a thriller mood this summer. I feel like beach reads are really either like true beach reads, like romance, summery themed books, or thrillers. And I really took the thriller thing and ran with it this summer. So anyways though, with that being said, I have 8 books to talk about the month of August. But before we get into that, first I want to give you my August stats. In the month of August, I read 8 books. I read 2 romance, 2 general fiction, 1 mystery, 1 young adult dystopia, and 2 young adult mystery / thrillers. I read 3 out of 6 of the books on my monthly TBR. 50%, it's not bad, okay? It's not bad. And thus 0 from my 24 and 2024 list, so I'm still at 10 out of 24. I'm falling behind, unfortunately. My average star rating was 3.7 stars. I read 3,245 pages. Okay, that's it for stats. Now let's talk about the books. First things first, I read The Hand on the Wall by Maureen Johnson, which is the 3rd book in the Truly Devious series, which I talked about in my June and July reading wrap up, because obviously I read books 1 and 2 in the last couple of months. If you're unfamiliar with the Truly Devious series, basically it follows teenage detective C.V. Bell as she investigates one of the most prolific cases that took place at her specialty school a long time ago. And obviously as she investigates this cold case, new things happen, new cases arise. She finds herself in a lot of tricky situations as she tries to figure out what happened to the founder of the school's wife and child, and also another student that went to the school that was murdered. This series is such an interesting thing for me because I truly enjoyed my time reading these books. However, I gave this 3 stars, and I think overall the series is like 3.25 star series for me. It's definitely more vibes based than it is like a super twisty, elaborate, interesting mystery, because in my opinion, once everything was wrapped up in this book, I kind of had this moment where I was like, wow, this really could have been one book. In terms of specifically the mystery. I said this in my previous wrap up, but we don't learn that much about the mystery in the first 2 books, and even though we get our definitive answers in this one, it wasn't something where I was like, wow, that was crazy. You know? Also, just like there's a romance in this that's a main part of it. I don't think it's executed super well. Don't love the love interest, and a lot of the characters are giving like caricature vibes, which is fun, but also obviously then in some ways they lack some depth. I think overall I would say it's like entertaining, sort of like mindless in a way, but not something I would go out of my way to recommend. So yeah, I know that probably makes no sense. Like, why did I read all 3 books back to back if they weren't that riveting? But I think it truly was a case of like right book, right time, and it really worked for me. So yeah. Book number 1. Next I read It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover, which was in a reading vlog that I filmed earlier this month. If you're unfamiliar with It Ends With Us, which I'm sure you're not because it's been everywhere lately, considering its movie adaptation came out this last month, I gave this 2.5 stars. I am just personally not a fan of Colleen Hoover's writing, and even though I can appreciate what she was trying to do with this story, which if you're unfamiliar, it's about a girl named Lily Bloom that finds herself trapped in an abusive relationship, and it's kind of a study on cycles of abuse and how women get trapped in cycles of abuse and how men perpetuate cycles of abuse with a little romance subplot thrown in there. I can appreciate that this can be like an eye-opening read for people that find it at the right time in their life, so I'm not discrediting that at all. A lot of people consider this a romance, and I just don't love that it was marketed that way specifically in its film adaptation. There are quite a few things that I don't love about this. I saw a TikTok review of this book a couple weeks ago, and if I can find it, I will link it in the description because she is so well spoken. I can't remember her name right now, but I will link it if I can find it. And I think it kind of puts into words a lot of my issues with the book itself. So instead of talking on for a long time about it, I will put that in the description. But just know, ultimately, didn't love. Don't think I'll be picking up another Colleen Hoover. That's really all I have to say about it. When it comes to It Ends With Us, I have no idea what to say. So Next, I read As Good As Dead by Holly Jackson, which is the 3rd and final book in the Good Girl's Guide to Murder trilogy, and I still don't know how I feel about this book. This was in the same reading vlog as It Ends With Us, and I think ultimately I'm settling on 3 stars for her. I said this in the reading vlog. Something happens in this book, which if you're unfamiliar with the Good Girl's Guide to Murder trilogy, essentially we are following teenage detective Pip, who in the first book is investigating a cold case in her town revolving around a missing girl named Andy Bell. And obviously things happen to her over the course of each book in the series, and this the third one, so I can't explain specifically what happened in this one, but I just have to say something happens about midway through this book. It is split into part 1 and part 2. And when we get to part 2, things get really interesting and take a turn that I truly was not anticipating. I had such a good time with part 1, although I will say Pip is really going through it in the beginning of this book, and that wasn't my favorite thing. But part 2 really changes the nature of what we're doing in here, like really does. I was reading so fast to get to the end because I was in a state of shock, of disbelief about what was happening. I know this is a lot of people's favorite book in the trilogy, but for me, I think the way that it shifts didn't completely work. It sort of ruined the reading experience for me a little bit because, like I said, I was in disbelief and I just wanted to get to the end more so because I was like, what is going on? And less so because I was like, wow, this is really good, you know? I do really like Holly Jackson's writing and I'm so excited to have finished the series, but wow, it was really interesting. Book number 3. Next up, I read The Guncle by Stephen Rowley, which I gave 5 stars. Loved it. Loved her. It was so cute, so fun, really funny, really sweet, really wholesome. I just am a sucker for feel-good fiction. I love feel-good fiction, and that's what this is, and it's really well done feel-good fiction, and I loved it. Basically, we follow Patrick O'Hara, who is uncle to Grant and Maisie, the children of his sister-in-law slash college best friend, and when she passes away, he finds himself suddenly in a situation where he has to take temporary custody of her kids and basically let them live at his Palm Springs home for a couple of months while his brother gets things sorted out. And it's just a really sweet exploration of grief, of family, of coming into oneself, of finding oneself again. I have seen so many people say that the audiobook for this is really good, and I kind of regret not listening to any of it because it was funny reading it in my head, but I think it would have been so much fun to hear Stephen Rowley narrating it himself because his sense of humor, it's great. I think pretty soon after I finished the reading vlog, I was unsure about where I was gonna like ultimately land with the rating, but I've thought about this quite frequently since I finished it, so she's gonna stay at 5 stars. Love her, would highly recommend, so yeah. Next, I read Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez, which I gave 3.75 stars. I enjoyed reading this a lot. I think Abby Jimenez is a really good writer. She's really good at writing emotional stories. It's really fun that she does interconnected standalones and that her men are so golden retriever, if he wanted to, he would vibes. I think there were just certain parts of this that didn't work for me completely like I was hoping they would. It was a little bit insta-lovey, and also Justin, the main character in this, was a little bit too good to be true for me, which usually I eat up. But something about this, occasionally I was like, wow. If you're unfamiliar, this follows Emma and Justin, who meet on Reddit actually because they believe they have the same curse where anyone they date and then break up with goes on to meet the loves of their life. So they agree to date each other in order to cancel out the curse, and obviously instead of that happening, they end up falling in love. So I will say also I was expecting it to be summer vibes, and it's not really. It's more called Just for the Summer because their arrangement to date is just for the summer, but that's pretty much the extent of the vibes, at least in terms of how much I felt them. I think there were just a couple of things about this that were more of a miss for me than I was expecting, and because I also had such high expectations because I really enjoyed Yours Truly, and people were saying this was better than Yours Truly. Yours Truly being the second book in the interconnected standalone situation. It just didn't hit for me the way I wanted it to. So 3.75 stars, would still recommend, especially if you like Abby Jimenez and you like super cutesy, if he wanted to he would romances, but just not one I think is gonna stick with me long term, so 3.75 stars. Next, I read The Perfect Couple by Ellen Hilderbrand, which is a, I would say, like contemporary fiction mystery situation. It's definitely not a mystery thriller. It's more of like a, I wouldn't say cozy mystery, but maybe like character driven mystery. It's set on Nantucket. It's part of Ellen Hilderbrand's Nantucket series, and it's very like wealthy East Coast summer vibes, which I really liked, but I wasn't biggest fan of the mystery. I just wasn't super locked in, I fear, while I was reading it. So I ended up rating this a 3-star, which really sucks because I like Ellen Hilderbrand's writing. I don't know, I wasn't obsessed, I think is what it boils down to. This book specifically follows a very wealthy family basically reacting to the death of somebody in the wedding party of one of their sons. And we basically get backstory on a lot of the characters. We get play-by-play of what's happening in the hours after the murder and throughout the investigation. And we spend a lot of time with each character. It's third person, but we spend time in each character's point of view for at least a little while, I think. I don't know if it's every character, but quite a few of them, which I did like. I really enjoy getting multiple points of view, even if they're in third person. I also, to be fair, was feeling a little bit slumpy when I was reading this. Like, I was having times where I kind of wanted to soft DNF it, but I had to push through and finish it because it's my book club's book for this month. So it could have just been because it was like wrong book, wrong time, as tends to happen occasionally. So I don't know. I would definitely still recommend if you like a slower paced mystery that is well constructed. Like, I didn't guess what happened at the end, but I think ultimately I was just a little bit underwhelmed. I don't think I'll be thinking about it after we talk about it in book club, so 3 stars feels right. 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. 5 stars. Loved her so much. I had really high expectations, and this is one of those situations where they were met. I think this has everything that I like in a romance book. I love yearning. I love pining. I love really well curated vibes. Like, a lot of this takes place in the Black literary community in New York City, and it feels like we're inside the Black literary community in New York City. Like, it's done so well. It explores deep themes. The younger character, and I think her character is done really well. I think it explores parenting really well. It explores trauma. It's just everything that's done in this is done well, in my opinion. It was exactly what I wanted it to be, and I am so glad that I picked it up. If you're unfamiliar, this is a second chance romance that follows Ava and Shane, who spent 7 days together when they were 17, fell in love, had a really intense connection, and then it ended really badly, and they spent the next 15 years of their lives writing each other into their works because they're both writers. And then they reconnect 15 years down the line and sort of explore if there's any way they could possibly make it work to be together as adults. And I ate it up. It was so incredibly good. If this sounds like something you would enjoy, I highly recommend you pick it up sooner rather than later. 5 stars, love her. And then lastly, we have a bit of a wild card. I was having a bit of a book hangover when I finished 7 Days in June, and I couldn't make myself pick up anything from my shelves, so I picked up my Kindle, and for some reason this was really calling to me, so I read The Gracier on my Kindle in less than 24 hours and immediately ordered a physical copy because I really liked it. Like, I really liked it. This is a young adult dystopian novel that's essentially described as Lord of the Flies with girls meets The Handmaid's Tale young adult version. I think this is a rare case where I finished a book and was like, this could have been so well served if it was a little bit longer. Like, I think if we'd gotten 50 extra pages, it would have been so much better. I don't know if I already said, I gave this 4 stars, and honestly for the first like 100 pages I was convinced it was gonna be a 5 star. It definitely like meanders a bit, and also there is a romance subplot that does take place that felt not necessarily out of place, but maybe just like a bit rushed, I would say. But overall, like, the themes that this explores, the prose, like Kim Leggett's writing is incredible. A lot of what happens in this is haunting, and I think I will be thinking about this premise for a long time. I was trying to like gather my thoughts by reading a lot of the Goodreads reviews, and honestly I still couldn't exactly put my finger on what it was, but I think this tries to do a lot, and I think it does a lot of it very well. But I think some of it, again, just if it had 50 extra pages to breathe, maybe we could have really like driven it home. And maybe if the ending was just a little bit different, like if what ends up happening with our girl was like a little bit different, I really think I could have given this 5 stars, but it just wasn't quite what I wanted it to be. Like, it didn't end up completely doing what I wanted it to do, but I will say it's riveting, it's addictive. I read it in less than 24 hours. I think if you read this description and you're intrigued, you should give it a try. I don't know, it just like, every time I read a dystopia that feels so distinct, even though it still fits cleanly into the dystopia genre, I get so excited because that used to be like my bread and butter when I was in middle school. So I don't know, I really liked it. 4 stars, would highly recommend. I'm like so glad that I picked it up, even though it was so random of me, but I really liked it. So book number 8. So these are all 8 books that I read in the month of August. I had a pretty good reading month overall. I would say I was feeling a little bit slumpy at the beginning of the month, but by the end I was picking up a random book on Kindle and reading it in less than 24 hours. So we love that. I'm very much back in the swing of things. I'm really excited for all my fall reads that I have lined up. I'm sure I'll be doing reading vlogs for a lot of them. So anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!